My name is Evelyn Grace Monroe. I'm 68 years old now, living in a small, quiet town nestled among Oregon's evergreen forests. It's the kind of place where the air always smells like pine and rain, where neighbors know each other's names, and the rhythm of life slows down with the seasons. It's peaceful here, but the road to get here, to this point in my life, has been anything but easy. When I look back on my life, I realize something. For nearly every day of my existence, my son was the center of it all. He was the reason I woke up every morning before dawn, the reason I kept going through sleepless nights and long, exhausting days. My entire life, my hopes, my struggles, my joys, they were all wrapped up in raising him. I had only one mission: to give him a life better than I had, to protect him from every hardship I could, to be the rock he could always depend on. I was young when he was born, just 22. I had grown up in Ohio, in a modest family where love was there, but money was always tight. I left home right after high school, dreaming of a better life. That's how I ended up out west, in Oregon, hoping to carve out a future for myself, far from the cramped rooms and old memories of my childhood. I took whatever job I could find: waitressing, cleaning houses, eventually a clerk at a small local store. The work was hard, and the pay was low, but it was honest. Then, when I was 24, I met his father. His name was Mark. He was charming in that careless, boyish way. We married quickly. I thought love would fix all the cracks in my life, but it didn't. 2 years after our wedding, when our son Jamie was just 2 years old, Mark left. Without a word, no explanation, just disappeared like a shadow at dusk. I still don't know why. I've tried to make sense of it all these years. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he never loved me as much as I thought. But none of that mattered to Jamie. He was my world, and now he was mine alone. Raising a child by yourself, especially one so young, is a kind of battle you can't truly understand unless you've been through it. You learn to survive on little sleep, to stretch your paycheck so thin it's almost invisible, to make dinners out of scraps and hugs. You become a fortress, a shelter against the storm. I worked 2 jobs for years, sometimes 3, just to keep us afloat. I never remarried even when the loneliness pressed in like a heavy fog. I didn't want Jamie to have to share his mother with anyone else. I didn't want to risk him feeling abandoned again. My heart was his home, and I was determined to be the only one there. The days blended into one another, mornings waking him for preschool, afternoons at the grocery store, evenings filled with homework and bedtime stories. I watched him learn to walk, to speak, to laugh. His first word was "Mama." I remember it like it was yesterday, how his tiny lips formed that simple word, how my heart swelled with a love so fierce it almost hurt. It was the start of everything. His eyes, bright and curious, followed me everywhere. Every scrape and tear was my pain, too. Every smile was a balm to my tired soul. I told myself that no matter what happened, I would be enough for him. Even when nights were long and the silence of our small apartment pressed against my chest, I kept going. I learned to be brave for both of us. And in that quiet struggle, a bond grew between us, strong, unbreakable, sacred. Sometimes I would catch myself watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling, and I'd whisper a prayer for his future. I wanted him to have more than I ever did. I wanted him to be happy, to be safe, to know he was loved beyond measure. I still have the faded pictures from those days: him in his little blue sweater, grinning from ear to ear, a milk mustache on his upper lip. I see them and I'm flooded with a warmth that's both beautiful and bittersweet. Looking back, I realize those early years were the foundation of everything I would later face. The sacrifices, the heartbreaks, the small moments of joy that made it all worthwhile. Because when you raise a child alone, you don't just give them life, you give them all of yourself. And sometimes, that's the hardest, most precious thing in the world. When Jamie started school, something shifted inside me. That tiny boy who once clung to my skirt with wide eyes was growing up, not just in size, but in spirit and confidence. Watching him take those first steps into the world beyond our small apartment was both terrifying and thrilling. I remember his first day of first grade like it was a moment frozen in time. The morning was crisp, leaves turning golden with the early signs of fall. I had dressed him in his best blue sweater, the one with little white stars stitched along the collar, and polished his black shoes until they gleamed. His backpack was heavy, stuffed with new notebooks and crayons, and his brown hair was neatly combed to the side. He looked so small and serious, standing at the bus stop with his little hands gripping the straps of his backpack. I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to tell him 100 things. Be kind, be brave, don't forget I'm here. But instead, I just kissed his forehead and whispered, I love you, Jamie. Be good today. He turned around and smiled. That shy, confident smile that made my heart skip a beat. I love you too, Mama. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything would be okay, that no matter what happened, my little boy was ready to face the world. Those early school years were filled with the small, precious milestones that only a mother truly understands. The first time he wrote his name on a paper without help. The first time he made a friend who wasn't family. The first time he brought home a drawing of our little house, a crooked but perfect heart that said home in every line. I kept every school report card, every drawing, every story he wrote. They were treasures, proof of a boy who was curious and kind and full of dreams. Adolescence came softly, like a slow tide pulling him away from me. I watched as his lanky arms grew stronger, his voice cracked, and his interest shifted from toys to books, from cartoons to music. I saw the first flicker of rebellion in his eyes, the longing to be seen as more than just Mama's boy. But no matter how tall he grew, how far he wandered into the world, Jamie was still my son, the boy I had raised alone, who had been my whole reason for waking up each day. I remember the first time he talked about girls. He came to me with the same nervous excitement I once had when I was his age. I listened, heart pounding, as he told me about a girl named Sarah who sat next to him in class. He spoke of her like she was a miracle. The way his eyes lit up when he said her name made me believe in the magic of young love all over again. Of course, I worried. I worried that he would get hurt, that he would be disappointed, that someone might take him away from me, but mostly I was proud, proud that he was growing into a man with a heart, with feelings, with dreams beyond the small world I had built for him. I would watch him practice baseball in the backyard, his legs kicking up dirt as he swung the bat with all his might. I saw him laugh with his friends, hear him sing in the shower, and sometimes catch a glimpse of the boy who was both my child and his own person, separate from me. School plays, soccer games, parent-teacher conferences. I attended them all, sometimes sneaking out of my night shifts to be there on time. I wanted him to know he was not alone, that I was always watching over him, even if he didn't see me. At night, when the house was quiet and the world felt heavy, I would sit in my worn armchair, looking at the photographs on the mantel. Pictures of Jamie with his first lost tooth, with a crooked smile after a scraped knee, with a proud grin holding up his honor roll certificate. Sometimes I wondered if I was doing enough, if all the sacrifices, the long hours, the lonely nights, were shaping him into the man I hoped he would become. I never told him about the nights I cried after he went to bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion and the sting of loneliness. I never let him see my doubts. my fears that maybe I wasn't enough. To him, I was simply Mom, the steady presence in his life, the one who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, who sewed the buttons back on his shirts, who stayed up late helping with homework and wiped away tears when a bully was cruel. He never saw the battles I fought in silence. As Jamie grew older, his world expanded beyond our little home. High school was a new chapter, one filled with excitement and uncertainty. I watched as he navigated friendships, heartbreaks, and the struggle to find his place. He brought home books filled with doodles and poems, shared stories of late night conversations with friends, and sometimes, in those rare quiet moments, confided in me about his hopes and fears. I was proud of the young man he was becoming, kind, thoughtful, determined, the kind of man I had dreamed he would be. Yet I also felt the subtle distance growing between us, the way his phone buzzed more than ever, the way he spent hours with friends or his new girlfriend, Sarah, the way he sometimes forgot to call or come home for dinner. I told myself it was part of growing up, that he needed space, independence, a life of his own. But deep down, I feared that the bond we had forged over so many years might one day loosen, that the boy who once called me Mama might forget the woman who had given him everything. I held on to the memories, the small moments of connection, like lifelines. One autumn evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills, Jamie reached over and took my hand. Mom, he said softly, thank you for everything. I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful. My heart swelled. You don't have to thank me, Jamie. I love you. He squeezed my hand, eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I believed that no matter where life took us, our bond was unbreakable. But life, as I would learn, has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. It was the kind of day I had dreamed about, the kind I hoped would come, though I never dared say it aloud. Jamie was a grown man now, in his mid-20s, with a steady job and a life unfolding before him. And finally, he was ready to introduce me to someone special. The first time Jamie brought Sarah home, I remember how my heart fluttered with a strange mixture of hope and nervousness. I wanted to like her. I wanted her to be the one who would love my son, protect him, and understand just how much he meant to me. I had spent the morning cleaning the house from top to bottom, dusting the shelves, scrubbing the floors, baking his favorite chocolate chip cookies. I wore my best dress, the one with the soft floral pattern that Jamie had always said looked nice on me. The scent of vanilla from the cookies filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint smell of fresh laundry. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed my hair and opened the door before the second knock. There she was, Sarah, tall and slender, with bright eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She wore a simple dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers, as if she had picked them just for me. Mrs. Thompson, she said, her voice gentle. I smiled warmly. Evelyn, please, come in, come in. Jamie stood behind her, a little shy but proud, and I could see the way his eyes softened when they met hers. It was the look of a man who had found something precious. We sat in the living room, and I offered tea and cookies. Sarah seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking questions about my job, my hobbies, even about the old house I had lived in since Jamie was a baby. She laughed easily at my stories, about how Jamie used to climb the apple tree in the backyard and come down with scraped knees, about the nights I stayed up comforting him through storms. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this woman could be part of our family. Over the next few months, Sarah became a regular presence in our lives. She came over for dinner, joined us for walks in the park, and even helped me with some of the household chores when Jamie was working late. At first, everything felt right. The three of us laughed together, sharing stories and dreams. Sarah and I even found common ground. Both of us had faced hardships in our lives, and we bonded over the desire to build something better for the ones we loved. But as time went on, I began to notice subtle changes. The warmth in Sarah's eyes sometimes gave way to a guarded coldness. She started to spend more time with Jamie alone, whispering in corners where I couldn't hear. Her smiles became less frequent when I was around, and I caught her watching me with a look I couldn't quite decipher, something that felt like suspicion or even resentment. The first time she said something that cut deeper than any harsh word before, I was setting the table for dinner. "You shouldn't spoil Jamie so much, Mrs. Thompson," she said quietly, almost to herself but loud enough for me to hear. "He needs to stand on his own feet." I paused, the fork trembling in my hand. "I only want what's best for him." Sarah's eyes flicked to mine, sharp and unreadable. Sometimes, too much help just makes things harder. It was the first crack in the fragile peace we had built. Over the months, Sarah's comments became more frequent, and the tone grew colder. She questioned my advice, dismissed my concerns, and even suggested that Jamie needed more privacy, as if my years of raising him didn't matter anymore. Jamie, for his part, began to change. He didn't call as often. When he did, his voice was distant, distracted. I heard phrases I had never imagined hearing from my son, words like boundaries, space, and "you're meddling." One afternoon, I sat in the living room, clutching a letter Jamie had left on the kitchen table. It was short and to the point. "Mom, Sarah, and I need some time to ourselves. Please understand." I read it over and over, the edges curling beneath my trembling fingers. Time to ourselves. Time without me. I wanted to scream, to beg him to remember who I was, the woman who had given him everything. But I stayed silent, tears streaming down my cheeks as I traced the words with my eyes. The wedding was both a celebration and a heartbreak. Jamie and Sarah stood before friends and family, promising each other a lifetime of love. I wore a pale blue dress and smiled as best I could, hiding the ache in my chest. Sarah looked radiant, her eyes shining with happiness. Jamie was beaming, but I noticed how often he glanced toward me, the hesitation in his smile. After the ceremony, the reception was filled with laughter, music, and dancing. I watched as Sarah and Jamie moved together, a perfect pair it seemed. But I felt like an outsider. At one point, Sarah approached me with a forced smile. "Thank you for everything, Evelyn. Really. But Jamie and I need to build our own life now." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. That night, as I lay awake in the quiet house, I wondered if the son I had raised was slipping away, if the love that once bound us was unraveling, strand by strand. I held on to the hope that things would improve, that Sarah would come to see me not as an obstacle, but as part of the family. But deep inside, I feared that the distance was growing too wide to cross. The hardest part of losing a son isn't the absence itself. It's the moments when you can see him right in front of you, but the person looking back feels like a stranger. It started with little things, little cracks in the glass that reflected the man I once knew. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat in the living room, waiting for Jamie to come home for dinner. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh herbs, the kind of meal he used to love when he was a boy. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second stretching out like an echo of a time I could never get back. When Jamie finally stepped through the door, I was ready to greet him with a smile, but he barely looked at me. His eyes were tired, and there was a distance there that hadn't been before. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "Jamie, dinner's ready. Come sit with me," I said, trying to sound cheerful. He shrugged off his jacket and walked past me, heading straight to the living room. I followed, carrying the plate with the last serving of chicken. Sarah was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up as Jamie sank beside her. "Hi, Sarah." I said softly, placing the plate on the coffee table. She nodded politely but didn't speak. Jamie reached for his plate but didn't invite me to sit with them. Instead, he stared at the TV, his eyes unfocused. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The silence stretched. Finally, Jamie looked at me and said something I never expected to hear from the boy I had raised. Mom, we need to talk. My heart skipped a beat. Of course, Jamie. What is it? He hesitated, then glanced at Sarah before answering. Sarah and I feel like you're meddling in our lives. You call too much, come over unannounced, and you try to tell us how to run our household. It's overwhelming. I blinked, confused and hurt. Meddling? Jamie, I'm your mother. I only want to help. No, Mom, we're adults now. We need space, Sarah added, her voice cold but controlled. It's not personal. It's just boundaries. I nodded slowly, trying to understand, but all I felt was a sharp sting in my chest. For years, I had been the one constant in Jamie's life, the one who stayed when his father left, the one who worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, the one who stayed awake at night worrying about his future. And now I was being told to step back, to be less of a mother. I tried to keep my voice steady. Jamie, I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I just want to be part of your life. He sighed deeply, looking away. I know, Mom, but things have changed. Sarah and I have our own life now. I nodded, tears threatening to fall. After that night, the calls became fewer, the visits less frequent. Sarah was always there when Jamie came home, and her coldness toward me was unmistakable. She stopped returning my calls altogether. One afternoon, Jamie called me, his voice hesitant. Mom, there's something I want to talk about. I think it's time you moved out for a while. I froze. Moved out? But I live here. We're doing some renovations. It's better if you stay somewhere else for a bit. I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't need to leave, but I knew better than to fight. So I packed a small bag and moved into a friend's guest room. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just a few weeks, but days turned into weeks, and then months. I called Jamie often, but he was always busy or distracted. He stopped answering my calls. One day, when I tried to visit the house, Sarah met me at the door. Her eyes were cold, her smile forced. Mom, you can't come in, she said firmly. I stood there, stunned. Jamie won't let you in. I held back tears, my voice barely a whisper. But he's my son. Not anymore, she said, and closed the door. I sat on the porch, clutching my purse, the weight of loneliness settling over me like a heavy blanket. That night I opened my diary and wrote, They say blood is thicker than water, but right now it feels like I'm a stranger to my own son. The hardest lesson life ever taught me wasn't about hardship or loneliness or even betrayal. It was about understanding that sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, they can close the door on you, and you can't open it again. After I left my son's house that day, clutching my small bag and my fragile hope, I told myself I would return soon. The walls of his home, once warm and full of laughter, now felt cold, like a stranger's place. I stayed with a close friend, Ruth, who insisted I take the spare room for as long as I needed. Ruth was kind, but I could see the worry in her eyes every time I mentioned Jamie. Weeks passed, and I tried to keep my routine, writing in my diary every night, hoping that Jamie would call, that he would miss me as much as I missed him. But the calls stopped, or when they came, they were curt. One evening, after dinner, I sat by the window of Ruth's guest room, staring out at the quiet street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. My phone buzzed. A message from Jamie. Can't talk right now. Busy. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. Busy. He was always busy. busy with Sarah, busy with his new life, busy without me. I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. I wanted to cry and beg him to remember who I was. But I sat quietly, tears rolling down my cheeks. Every night I would read through my diary entries from years past. The first steps Jamie took, the nights I stayed up worrying about his first day of school, the countless games we played in the backyard, his shy smiles, his scraped knees, the times I held him when he was scared. All those memories felt like a different lifetime now. Then one day, almost 2 months after I moved out, I decided I had to try again. I needed to see my son, to tell him I loved him, to remind him that no matter what, I was still his mother. I called him, no answer. I sent a text, no reply. So I drove to the house. The neighborhood looked the same, but I knew nothing inside was as it used to be. I stood at the door, hesitating. The door opened before I could knock. It was Sarah. Her face was unreadable, but the coldness was there. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I just wanted to see Jamie, to talk." Sarah shook her head slowly. "Jamie isn't home, and even if he was, he doesn't want visitors right now." "I'm his mother." Sarah's eyes flashed. "Not anymore." She shut the door in my face. I pressed my hand against the cold wood. For a moment, I felt like I could melt right there on the porch. Then I stepped back and walked away. That night I wrote in my diary, "The door is closed, the key is lost, and I'm left outside, watching the son I raised disappear before my eyes." The days that followed were the darkest. I stopped trying to reach Jamie. The silence was deafening. I spent my hours in quiet reflection, surrounded by memories and photos. The loneliness was a deep ache. I remembered how I had spent decades pouring my love into Jamie. Sometimes too much, some might say, but every sacrifice was worth it to see him smile. Now, the smile felt like a ghost. I thought about the years when I had to work 2 jobs, when I barely slept because I wanted to make sure Jamie had everything he needed. I never remarried. I told myself it was for Jamie's sake, not wanting another man to come between us or hurt him the way his father had. But now I wondered if all those years, all my efforts, had been for nothing. Had I been holding on to a dream that was never real? One afternoon, Ruth brought me a letter. "It came for you," she said gently. I unfolded it carefully. It was from Jamie. The letter was brief. "Mom, I'm sorry if you feel hurt. Things have changed, and I need space. Please respect our wishes. Sarah and I love you, but this is what's best for us." I sat down slowly, the words blurring through my tears. Space. What kind of space tells a mother she can no longer be part of her son's life? I needed to understand what had changed. What had made the son I raised turn away from me? I started asking around gently, trying to find out more about Sarah and Jamie's life together. It was then that I learned about a secret I hadn't expected. The house, the place where I had raised Jamie for all these years, was sold. Not by me, not by Jamie as far as I knew, but by someone close, someone I had trusted. The realization hit me like a blow. The house, my sanctuary, my home, was gone, and I had been kept in the dark. I spent nights pacing the small room Ruth had offered me, tears and anger mixing in my heart. How could they do this without telling me, without asking me? The betrayal cut deep. I thought of my brother-in-law, Mark, Sarah's brother. I had always thought he liked me, but now I wondered if he had played a part in this. Had he convinced Jamie and Sarah to push me away? Had he orchestrated this behind the scenes? I felt a crushing weight of helplessness, all the years of love, sacrifice, and devotion, reduced to whispers and shadows. But through the hurt, a small flame of resolve began to burn inside me. If Jamie wanted to push me away, to erase me from his life, I would not vanish quietly. I was going to fight, but on my terms, not with anger or shouting, but with strength, dignity, and the quiet power of a woman who had loved fiercely and lived fully. That night, I opened my diary once more. I wrote, I may be pushed aside, but I am not defeated. I am not invisible. My love for Jamie is the foundation of my life, and even if he cannot see it now, it will remain. After the door slammed shut on me that day, a strange stillness settled inside my heart, the kind of quiet that's heavy, almost suffocating. It's funny how loneliness can feel so loud, isn't it? Like a constant whisper echoing through every room, every shadow, every quiet moment. I never thought I'd reach a point in life where my own son, the child I had raised with trembling hands and sleepless nights, would become a stranger. But here I was, sitting alone in a small apartment that Ruth had kindly lent me, surrounded by walls that knew nothing of my past, nothing of my love, nothing of my pain. I spent hours poring over old photographs, my fingers tracing Jamie's face from babyhood to adolescence, then into young manhood. The photo of him at his first birthday, with a crooked smile and tiny fingers clutching a cake, brought tears to my eyes. You were mine, my son, I whispered to the faded image, and no one will ever take that away. But the ache was deep, and the silence around me was overwhelming. My diary, June 14th. The house is empty without him. The rooms are full of memories that no longer belong to me. I walk through my days like a ghost, haunted by laughter that has faded into silence. I don't understand what I did wrong. Did I love him too much? Was my presence too much to bear? I sit by the window and watch the world go by, wondering if Jamie remembers the nights I stayed awake just to hear his breathing. I am alone, but I am not broken. Loneliness taught me things no one ever warned me about. I learned to listen to the quiet inside myself. I learned to walk through memories without breaking. I learned that love, even when not returned, is still love. And maybe, just maybe, love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. But it wasn't just loneliness that weighed on me. It was betrayal. The realization that the house, the one place that had been my refuge, where I had raised Jamie with all the love I had been sold without my knowledge, was like a knife twisting inside my chest. I had always thought that the home we shared was ours, mine and Jamie's, and yet, behind my back, deals were made, signatures signed, and the foundation of my life was ripped away. I reached out to an old family friend, Mr. Thompson, a kind man who had known Jamie since he was a boy. He was hesitant at first, but eventually told me what he knew. The house was sold last month, he said quietly, and not by your son. I felt the room spin. Who then? I asked, voice barely a whisper. Sarah's family, Mark, her brother, handled the paperwork. It was a cruel twist. My own sister-in-law's family quietly erasing me from the place I had called home for decades. I thought back to the subtle coldness I had seen in Sarah's eyes, the way she had shut the door in my face, the way Jamie had stopped calling, stopped visiting. I understood then that this wasn't just about a house. It was about control, about rewriting the story to erase me. My diary, June 22nd. Betrayal is a heavy cloak to wear, heavier than loneliness. I thought family meant love, but sometimes family is just a word. The house, my sanctuary, gone, and me standing outside, forgotten. The weight of it all was crushing. I cried for the loss of the home. I cried for the loss of my son. I cried for the years I had given everything, only to be discarded like an old coat. But amid the tears, something inside me shifted, a quiet flame of determination. If Jamie and Sarah wanted to erase me, I would not fade quietly. I would not be invisible. I would find a way to make them remember who I was, who I am. Days turned into weeks. I began to reclaim small parts of myself I had lost raising Jamie. I volunteered at the local library. I joined a knitting circle. I reconnected with old friends. But at night, when the world was quiet, the ache returned. One evening, Ruth brought me a cup of tea and sat down beside me. "Evelyn," she said gently, "you've done everything for Jamie. Maybe now it's time to do something for yourself." Her words stung, but they were true. I had spent so long living for my son that I had forgotten to live for Evelyn. My diary, July 1st. I am tired, but I am not done. I am hurt, but I am not broken. I am a mother, but I am also a woman, and I will find my way back. The coming days were filled with quiet courage. I started writing letters to Jamie, not to send, but to heal. Words poured from my heart onto the pages. I told him about the nights I watched over him, the dreams I had for him, the love I still carried. And then I began to think about the future. If Jamie didn't want me in his life, I needed to secure my own. I met with a lawyer to update my will. I wanted to leave something behind, not just money or property, but a legacy. A reminder that I was here, that I mattered. I thought about the friends I had made, the women in the knitting circle who had become like family, the neighbors who waved when I walked by. They were my new roots, my new home. But no matter how much I tried to build a new life, the pain lingered. Sometimes it woke me in the middle of the night. Sometimes it hit like a tidal wave when I least expected it. One morning, I received a call from Jamie. My heart leapt, but the voice on the other end was cold. "We need to talk," he said. My hands trembled. Was this the moment I had been waiting for? Or just another door closing? I looked out the window, the sun rising over Oregon's green hills. I took a deep breath. Whatever was coming, I would face it with the strength I had found in the silence. My diary, July 15th. I raised him alone. I loved him fiercely. And now I am learning to love myself. This is not the end. It is a new beginning. The day Jamie finally called, my heart was a fragile thing. I'd lived with the ache of his absence for months now. The empty rooms, the silenced phone, the absence of his laughter echoing in the house that no longer belonged to me. When I heard his voice, clipped and unfamiliar, it was like hearing a ghost speak from a distance I could no longer reach. "Mom," he said, voice uncertain, "can we meet? There are things we need to talk about." I paused, the years of hurt folding into a fragile hope. Could this be a turning point? Could the son I raised, the boy I'd kissed and held through countless nights, finally remember the woman I was? But before that meeting, I knew I had to find peace within myself, to speak my truth one last time, to leave something behind, not bitterness or anger, but clarity and strength. I sat down at my desk, the wooden surface scarred by decades of life's wear, and began to write. The letter, Jamie. This letter is not a plea. It is not a demand for reconciliation. It is a gift of honesty and a farewell. I raised you with every ounce of love I had through sleepless nights and endless days. I worked 2 jobs so you wouldn't know hunger. I held your hand through your first steps, your first words, your first heartbreak. When your father left, I became both mother and father to you. I chose not to remarry because I wanted you to feel safe, to know that my love was only for you. Watching you grow was my greatest joy. I saw in you the man I had always hoped for, kind, strong, and full of promise. But as time passed, something changed. You drifted away. Your visits became scarce, your calls fewer. I felt the coldness in your wife's eyes, the sharp words, the distance. When you asked me to move out, I thought it was temporary, but it was forever. I lived through loneliness so deep it echoed in my bones. I discovered betrayals I never imagined, the sale of the house, the silent erasure of my place in your life. Yet, despite it all, I love you. But love is not enough to bind two souls where there is no space for both. I am choosing peace now. Peace for you and peace for me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not seeking revenge. I am simply saying goodbye. You will find my will enclosed. I have left you what is rightfully yours, but also what I have chosen for myself. Know this, I am proud of the man you were. I will always love the son you are. And now, I must love the woman I am becoming. With all my heart, Mom. Folding the letter carefully, I placed it atop the final page of my updated will. The will was a reflection of my journey, my pain, and my strength. I had left Jamie a modest sum, the money I had saved for him over the years, but more importantly, I had made provisions to give the rest of my estate to the community center in our town, the place where I found new friends, new purpose, and new hope. The house that had been sold without my consent was no longer mine to give, but what I left was a testament to my resilience. It was a statement that I would not vanish quietly, that my life mattered beyond the shadow of betrayal. When Jamie and I finally met, it was in a quiet cafe, a neutral ground between us filled with unfamiliar tension. He looked different, older, wearier. His eyes held shadows I hadn't seen before. We sat across from each other, the space between us thick with unspoken words. Mom, he began, voice cracking. I, I don't know how to say this. I'm sorry. The words hit me like a sudden storm. I looked into his eyes, searching for the boy I had raised, the son I had loved fiercely. I'm not sure what you're sorry for, I said softly. For everything, he whispered. For pushing you away, for not being the son you deserved. Tears welled up, but I kept my voice steady. Jamie, I raised you with all my heart, but you had to live your life, make your choices. He nodded, swallowing hard. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said, but it hurt anyway. We sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down, but beneath it, a fragile thread of understanding began to weave. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on what forgiveness truly meant. Was it about forgetting the pain? Or was it about accepting the scars and choosing to live beyond them? I realized I was ready to forgive Jamie. Not for him, but for myself. To release the bitterness that had clung to me like a shadow, to step into the light of my own life. I moved into a small cottage near the community center. I filled my days with volunteering, knitting, and quiet walks in the garden. The people I met there didn't know my past. They only saw the woman who smiled, who listened, who gave freely of her heart. I found joy in simple things: the morning sun, the scent of blooming flowers, the laughter of children playing nearby. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Jamie. He wrote of regret, of hope, of a desire to rebuild what had been broken. He didn't ask for immediate forgiveness. He simply wanted me to know he was trying. I folded the letter and placed it beside my diary. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a lightness in my heart. My diary, August 10th. I am no longer just a mother who was abandoned. I am Evelyn, a woman who has loved, lost, and found herself. The past is a chapter closed. The future is a blank page, and I am ready to write my story. This was not the end of my journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was whole, proud, and at peace, where love was not just given, but also received, and where I finally understood that the greatest love I could ever have was the love I had for myself.